Join us on this journey. Weekdays 6:30 p.m. IST, 1 p.m. GMT.
Hello and welcome to WION live broadcast from London. I'm Oliver Regan and these are the headlines. After a massive victory in election, Russian President Vladimir Putin said Moscow is ready for talks on a French proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine during the Olympic Games, but would need to take Russia's interests on the front line into account. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak calls on his party's MPs to stick with the plan, claims there's a sense that the UK economy is turning a corner, this amid Tory concerns over his leadership and potential rebellion over his Rwanda deportation plans. The first flight from Haiti reportedly landed at the Miami International Airport on Sunday. This is the first flight that has left the troubled nation in 2 weeks. There were 47 passengers on board, all of them American citizens. US-South Korea bilateral ties and misuse of technology against democracy by authoritarian regimes on the table. Our Secretary of State Antony Blinken meets his South Korean counterpart on the sidelines of the Summit for Democracy in Seoul. Crowds throng the exposition on Lord Buddha at Krabi in Thailand. India has sent relics to the Buddha and his disciples that are a huge draw at the event. The tears flow at badminton's most prestigious tournament. Unseeded Jonathan Christie becomes the first Indonesian to win the men's singles title since 1994. Carolina Marin's injury troubles are history after a second women's singles title.
The Yonex All England Open men's singles champion, Jonathan Christie!
President Vladimir Putin has won a landslide victory in the Russian presidential election. The outcome means the 71-year-old Putin is set to embark on another 6-year term in office as he cements his strong grip over the country. Reports claim Putin won more than 87% of the vote. Communist candidate Nikolai Kartanov finished second with just under 4%. Nationwide turnout was 74.22% at 1600 GMT when polls closed. In 2018, the turnout was 67.5%. In his victory speech, Putin said he will prioritise tasks associated to war in Ukraine.
In general, the initiative is fully on the side of the Russian army. In some directions, our guys are butchering the enemy. We are advancing every day. Gradually, very delicately, but every day. This is a bit more than active defense, but we all see this anyway.
Putin criticised the US political and judicial systems as he said the whole world is laughing at Washington. He also said he would work with whoever wins the US election, expressing no preference for any candidate. Putin, in his speech, warned the West that the presence of Western troops in Ukraine could push the world to the brink of World War III. However, the Russian leader said he's ready for talks on a French proposal for a ceasefire in Ukraine during the Olympic Games.
I do not know about the statement of France's president. We are ready to discuss any issues, but as always, within any situation, we will proceed from the interests of the Russian Federation and, of course, the situation at the front line.
Meanwhile, Western countries condemned the election. The United States said the vote was neither free nor fair. Germany called it a pseudo-election under an authoritarian ruler. The UK Foreign Secretary David Cameron criticised the illegal holding of elections on Ukrainian territory. The Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Putin of leading a dictatorship in Russia, while adding that Russia's presidential election was an illegitimate imitation. Thousands of protesters demonstrated against Putin. The protests took place at polling stations both inside Russia and abroad. In one of these polling stations, Alexei Navalny's widow was also present. Yulia Navalnaya said that she wrote her late husband's name on the ballot paper. The Russian presidential election witnessed an absence of any real challenges, as major opposition figures are abroad, in jail, or dead. Well, for more on this, we're joined by Dimitri Babich, joining us live from Moscow. He's a political analyst at the Voice of Russia. Dimitri, many thanks for your time this morning. An overwhelming victory for Vladimir Putin. No surprise, of course, but give us a sense of the feeling in Moscow right now.
Well, it was an important vote, despite what the Western media says, because it was a sort of a plebiscite on the war. People who strongly disapproved of Vladimir Putin's decision to aggravate the military action in Ukraine, which has been going on since 2014, they could vote for another candidate. They could vote, for example, for Vladislav Davankov, who openly said that he would support negotiations with Ukraine now, without conditions and probably at Russia's disadvantage. So basically, it was a plebiscite, it was a vote. Do you support the forceful conduct of the war, which President Putin is doing now, or do you support another solution? And it's very important that 87% of the voters supported what we would call the war effort in this situation. As for the fact that the win was known in advance, well, there are such situations. Could anyone say, for example, during the French election recently, that Marine Le Pen would beat Emmanuel Macron in the second round? No, it was a foregone conclusion that Macron would win. The same story was between Jacques Chirac and Jean-Marie Le Pen in 2002. So there are situations when you have a clear favorite at the election, and this was precisely the case now in Russia, aggravated by war.
Of course, we did see some protests in and around the country, and of course there's been widespread criticism from other countries about the election. Has this had any impact in Russia itself?
Well, I think the Western hostility towards Russia mobilized the voters. It mobilized the electorate for Putin. Basically, Putinists were encouraged by the statements from Western leaders that this election was illegal or wrong or whatever. You know, there is a very good American expression, all politics is local. The main thing is not what the other countries think about you. The main thing is what your voters think about you. And the voters in Russia, for good or for bad, support Putin overwhelmingly. As for the protests, please note that most of them happened abroad. Inside Russia, there were no protests near the polling stations. I mean, I visited 10 polling stations yesterday in Moscow. Everything was quiet. As for the voting abroad, please note that Western countries, Western governments discouraged Russian citizens living abroad, living in Germany or in France. They discouraged them from going to vote. But still, there were long lines, long queues near the Russian embassies. Russians living abroad en masse came to vote. I'm absolutely sure that they voted for Putin, most of them, because if they were against Putin, they could just stay at home. That's what the Western governments told them to do. But still, they showed up in huge numbers. Why? Because they live in France, in Germany, in Britain, everywhere they hear a lot of anti-Russian propaganda, I'm sorry, a lot of insults against Putin, and that strengthened the protest feeling inside them. So out of protest against what is going on in the Western media, a lot of them went and voted at the Russian embassies in the countries where they live.
Yes, well, Putin has secured another 6-year term. Dimitri Babich, many thanks there for your insight live from Moscow. Troubles mount for the British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak amid rising tension from his cabinet and party MPs. Sunak has urged the members of his Conservative Party to stick with his plan, insisting the UK economy is showing signs of a turnaround and recovery. Sunak said 2024 will be the year when Britain bounces back, adding that inflation will return to 2% in a few months and that the UK would outperform Japan, Germany, France and Italy in the next 5 years. Sunak's comments come after reports that senior Tories are preparing a plot to oust him. There's speculation the British Prime Minister is to be replaced with the Commons leader Penny Mordaunt as head of the Conservative Party. Sunak will deliver a major speech around the state of the economy in Warwickshire later today. He's expected to assure that he would seize post-Brexit freedoms to slash red tape for firms. Sunak's also expected to meet a committee of former members of Parliament later today as he looks to secure support from senior MPs. Well, the Conservative Party is already struggling in opinion polls, predicting a rout for Rishi Sunak. This as the main opposition Labour Party maintains a 20-point lead. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi made a rare visit to New Zealand on Monday. He's on a 5-day official visit to New Zealand and Australia, with a major focus on trade as Beijing tries to mitigate the impact of economic deceleration. Speaking in Wellington before meeting his New Zealand counterpart, Wang said the trip is a chance to shore up the stressed diplomatic ties between the two countries. Beijing has been increasingly assertive on key regional issues like Taiwan and the South China Sea. Wang also emphasised that China is seeking to strengthen communications with New Zealand and wants to work with the country to maintain peace in the region. The Chinese Foreign Minister also held a meeting with the New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon. Both leaders asserted that the ties between the two countries are a force for global stability.
Our work together with China is really critical to us in building our relationships out across the region. It's been 51 years now of a very strong relationship built on very good diplomatic relationship between China and New Zealand, and we look to continue to build on that relationship.
Later in the week, the Chinese Foreign Minister will meet his Australian counterpart Penny Wong in Canberra. China and Australia recently resolved a series of simmering trade disputes. Australian Trade Minister on Sunday said he was hopeful China will lift tariffs on Australian wine once a review is completed by March end. However, the two countries continue to spar over human rights and Beijing's growing clout in the Pacific region. Rishi Sunak confronts a critical juncture as the UK faces economic uncertainty. The misery index, a gauge combining unemployment and inflation, currently reflects the highest levels of economic distress since the 1990s. This poses a significant challenge to Sunak's government, which took office amid escalating economic woes. With the economy tipping into recession in 2023 and a persistent cost of living crisis, the timing of the next election becomes pivotal. Analysis reveals that Sunak's strategy revolves around delaying the election until late 2024, anticipating an improvement in economic indicators. The forecast suggests that inflation, which peaked at 7.4% in 2023, is expected to decline in the coming months. Additionally, unemployment, which remains subdued despite the recession, is projected to increase marginally. Sunak's approach hinges on the hope that by postponing the election, the most acute economic pains would have eased, potentially boosting the government's electoral prospects. However, the challenge for Sunak lies in bridging the gap between economic data and voter sentiment. While economists anticipate a turnaround, public perception often lags behind real-time improvements. This discrepancy underscores the complexity of Sunak's task in garnering voter support. As historical trends suggest, ruling parties tend to suffer electoral setbacks following periods of economic hardship. With the Labour Party leading the polls by a substantial margin, Sunak's government faces an uphill battle to regain public trust amid ongoing economic turbulence. Manchester United have salvaged a poor season by ending the quadruple bid of their arch-rivals Liverpool. Liverpool paid the price for some poor finishing as Amad Diallo scored in the 121st minute to edge a 7-goal